Okay. Anyway, so I pull into this tire place, and the old guy comes out, and and he's ready. I'm just reaching for my door handle, and he's already got me half jacked up. So he is fixing that tire no matter what I say. So anyway, he puts a plug. Anyway, he takes the tire off, checks it out, finds the leak, puts a plug in it, puts it back on. I say to the guy, we're ready to go, and go. And all of this took like about 15, 20 minutes. It was really, So I said to the guy, okay, so how much do I owe you? He says, how about $20? And I'm surprised. I'm thinking, $20? I figure like $50, $60 or something like that, So I was surprised. I go, $20? So he looks at me and says, okay, well, give me 10, we'll call it even. Anyway, humorous story, but in all seriousness, one of the things that I know about, I see in the United States in my traveling, is that unlike here in Canada, we have a policy in Canada, government policy of multiculturalism. We design programs around it. We factor multiculturalism and race and gender identity into most of the decisions that we make now in government, and slowly that's been imposed on the society in general by government fiat, by government order, and the whole idea about it is to promote diversity. And then you go to the United States, where until very recently they've had none of this stuff. And my chief observation of the United States is, especially in the bigger cities, is that without any effort whatsoever, it is the most multicultural place that you can think of.
Certainly.
I mean, you could live your entire life in New York City, never step out of New York City, and have traveled around the world many times, never having stepped out of the city. It's that diverse, it's that multicultural, and people hold on to their culture. The whole thing about, it's the United States. We think that Canada's multicultural. The United States is a melting pot, but the reality is quite the opposite. The United States is it may be a melting pot, but there's far more diversity in the United States than there is in Canada, with all of the money we spent and all of the effort. So I've always found that to be a curiosity. Yeah. But the thing is, again, diversity, it's messy.
Yeah. Getting back to the New York City thing, when my dad moved to Canada back in the late 50s, it was around the same time that my uncle, his brother, moved to New York City. It's my favorite uncle. He's, you always have that favorite uncle who's really cool and everything. This guy was super cool.
Okay, so you got that guy. So, okay, not the rest of you uncles that he just didn't like. Okay, just his cool favorite uncle.
Yeah, that favorite uncle.
Want to make sure that we got that properly established there.
And his name was Ansel. He used to come up to Canada maybe once every second or third summer and spend some time with us. And he had the Jamaican/New York accent, which I thought was really, really awesome. But I was thinking, I was like,
imagine what that sounds like.
Yeah, he has a really cool accent. I'm not even going to try to do it. But now that I think about it, when he used to come up and visit us in Ottawa, and he was always impressed with the cleanliness of Ottawa and how the people were polite and everything. But I don't recall my uncle ever complaining about racism in the States. And this guy, he was like a tool and die man. And so he probably could have easily have gotten a job in Canada and moved out of the Bronx. He was living in the Bronx at the time when the Bronx was not pretty. Back in the 60s and 70s, like the Bronx was rough.
That would be the time it was not pretty.
Yeah.
It's still not pretty, by the way.
That's
the Bronx
right.
But it's nowhere near what it was like then.
Yeah. And my grandmother lived there too. So my grandmother lived in the Bronx, my uncle. But my grandmother and my uncle, you couldn't blast them out of the Bronx. They loved it there. That was their home. And I don't recall my uncle ever complaining about racism. I don't recall my uncle ever saying, oh, yeah, I got pulled over by the police and hassled and whatnot. I never heard those stories. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but if it had happened, I'm sure he would have told us once or twice. Those stories never came up.
Well, these things happen. Yeah. But, getting back to what Denzel Washington talks about, and we don't have a clip of this, but you can find these things easily on YouTube, where he's being interviewed on a red carpet somewhere at an entertainment, show, and they're talking about racism, and they're talking about President Obama and et cetera, and the reporter asks him about racism, and do you think that we're a more or less tolerant society now post Obama, and his response was that, and again I'm paraphrasing, was, you know what, you can't legislate love, you can't legislate respect. Right. That's a personal attitude. Mm-hmm. So we talk to each other, we respect one another, and that's the way you're brought up. It's the way you're raised. It's what he was talking about before. Where was their father? These are behaviors that can't be imposed legislatively. You either are a respectful, decent person, or you're not. And my experience is that Americans, and I think here that I'm not overgeneralizing when I say this, Americans are decent people. Yeah. That doesn't mean that there aren't bad Americans. There are bad Canadians. I'm Jewish. I can tell you there are bad Jews. What?
Do you know what's really sad about all this? Is we have to explain that.
Yeah.
That too many people out there don't like Americans, and they don't even know why. And we have to tell them that, you know what? They're no different than we are, and say all the things that all three of us have been saying for the last half hour, is that Americans are decent people. They, Canadians get on their moral high horse, and they say, well, define a Canadian? Well, I'm not an American. That's well, okay, but what does that mean? That we have this sense of false moral superiority that somehow we're better than they are. When they're cut from the same cloth, they basically have the same roots as we do. The only difference is how our countries were born. Theirs was born in the fires of revolution, and ours was born through boredom at the negotiations table. So, maybe that's why Americans a lot more exciting country to live in than Canada. The nation is the way it was born.
Well, one thing that I will say that frightens me genuinely, and that is on the whole race relations thing, and that is the obsession that we now have throughout society. It used to be something that was just the radical left, but it's permeated society completely, and that is our obsession with identity, our obsession with race, or our obsession with other characteristics that like gender, etc. Okay, and to the point where we're trying to cure a problem that is incurable. We're trying to legislate things that you can't legislate. But in doing that, what we're also doing is we are entrenching in law the principle that if your skin color is different from another person's, you are different and you ought to be treated differently. Right. Now, I will say this. For the idea of treating people differently right now is it's very benevolent. It's for the right reasons, okay? Mm-hmm. But from my perspective, the danger here is not in whether it's beneficial or malevolent. The danger is in the treating people differently and establishing that principle in law. And for me, it's a very short distance from treating people better because of the color of their skin or their religion or whatever, and treating them worse. To me, the law should be completely colorblind. And when I say the law, I mean the law writ large. I mean government programming, all of these things. I'm not indifferent to, historical realities that put pressure on us to treat people differently.
Yeah, and I think it's possible to... we've seen examples where you overcompensate. So, yes, blacks in the South were not treated very well up in the 50s and 60s. But that's been rectified by the civil rights movement, all the work done by people like Martin Luther King. But you can say the same thing for women, for Aboriginals. You want to be a better society than the society that came before you. But the danger is overcompensating and then going the other way, where now you're hurting the people that you're it's like a retribution thing, where, well, now that you had your turn, it's our turn to be number one. No, we're all number one. It's like you can't start ranking people.
Okay, and with that, we're going to have to go for a break. I hate to say it, guys. Man, the time is just flying by here. So, again, if you're listening to the show live, stay put. We'll be back in a few minutes. And if you're listening to the podcast, thank you for joining us. And we will catch you the next time here on the Nick and Joe Show on ThinkRadio.ca.